Morning, ladies. Today, our learning target is I can determine the theme of a passage by evaluating the actions of characters. So what we're going to do is we're going to read Children of the Storm. And I know that this picture didn't come out as well for the print off because it was in black and white, but hopefully here you can see that these are all homes, and this is all the flooding that happened in Hurricane Katrina. So flooding from Hurricane Katrina. These are just the tops of roofs. These are all the homes that were destroyed. Very, very sad. All right, so let's read about Tanisha. Tanisha Downzero was supposed to start fourth grade in New Orleans back in the fall of 2005. But just before classes began, Hurricane Katrina, one of the worst hurricanes to ever hit the United States, slammed the states on the coast of the Gulf of Mexico on August 29, 2005. Tanisha was sad and scared as she watched heavy rains and high winds rip through her city on the Mississippi River. When New Orleans flooded, school was the last thing on Tanisha's mind as she and her family drove 350 miles west to Houston. More than 24,000 evacuees from New Orleans moved to the Houston Astrodome, but Tanisha and her family spent 5 days in a hotel. Within a week, a generous Houston family had given the Downzero family shelter in the loft above their home. A few days later, Tanisha started school in Houston. She was one of an estimated 125,000 New Orleans children who were scattered across Louisiana and neighboring states to start a new school year. The Houston School District enrolled almost 2,000 students in the days following Katrina, including Tanisha and her brother Taryn. The district also reopened 2 schools that had closed the previous spring. Those schools were devoted entirely to children displaced by the storm. It's hard to move and start going to a new school. It was even harder for the many children displaced from the states hit hardest by Hurricane Katrina. School guidance counselor said that relocating to an unfamiliar school is bound to affect many of the children. Tanisha and Taryn, though, were doing well. They had enrolled at McGregor Music and Science Magnet School. McGregor accepted more than a dozen displaced students. After just 2 days at school, Tanisha and Taryn were making new friends. Our new school is great, Tanisha told Senior Edition. Many of Tanisha's and Taryn's classmates embraced the new arrivals. We want to make our new classmates feel good because we know they've gone through so much, James McKenneth, a 4th grader at McGregor, told Senior Edition. It's cool to have new friends, added Ty McKeffin, James' sister, a 3rd grader. And they get to have fun in a new school and stay in a safe place. Taryn missed playing basketball with his friends in New Orleans. Tanisha missed the teachers and students at her old school. But the family said they would most likely settle down in Texas for good. I want to stay in Houston, Tanisha told Senior Edition. All right, so now before we do our second read, we're going to preview the questions. All right, so we have A, B, and C here. These were questions that were added in. So ladies, this is as you can see at the bottom, which you'll see in just a moment, this is on ReadWorks. There is an electronic version, but these 3 extra questions here were added by Miss Egging. So you'll be able to check the ones that are numbered in a second, but these ones are additions. So A, how did Tanisha change in the story? Why did she change? How do her actions help us determine her character traits? B, how do the actions of Tanisha and Taryn's classmates help support the theme of the passage? How would the theme change if the siblings hated their new, I know I have a typo here, I'm sorry, new, this is supposed to be town, and explain. All right, then we have a couple more questions here. So multiple choice, I want you to use ECI, and of course short responses, I want you to use RAP. Why did the Downzero family move out of a Houston hotel? Number 2, which statement is an opinion rather than a fact? Number 3, read this paragraph in the text. The Houston School District enrolled almost 2,000 students in the days following Katrina, including Tanisha and her brother Taryn. The district also reopened 2 schools that had closed from the previous spring. These schools were devoted entirely to children displaced by the storm. So based on this evidence, why might the Houston School District have reopened schools? Then last couple questions here. Tanisha stated that she thinks her new school in Houston is great. Based on the text, What probably caused her to think this? And then number 5, you're using rap. Tanisha said that she wants to stay in Houston. Based on the information in the text, why might she want to stay there? Support your answer with evidence from the text. All right, ladies, so now it's time to close read. I'll show you my marks in just a moment. So again, make sure that you're chunking your text. You can chunk it however makes sense to you. Circle and attempt to define unknown words, underline key information. Remember to focus on information that would help to support your answers because you've already previewed your questions. Summarize in the margin and identify any elements that may be helpful. All right, so now I'm going to show you the marks that I made when I did my close read. So first things first, I can determine the theme of a passage by evaluating the actions of a character. So the marks I made here, determine means figure out, right? Theme, this is a universal message of the story, and keep in mind themes are universal. They can be applied to multiple stories. Please don't get that confused with main idea, which is unique to each story written. Evaluating is taking closer look and measuring. So you're going to be really looking at the actions of the characters to figure out how they determine the theme. We're going to come back to possible themes in a moment after I go over my close reading marks. So I boxed Tanisha because she was our main character, and again, we're talking about our setting here. It tells us that Hurricane Katrina is one of the worst hurricanes to ever hit the United States. Major item of importance there. And then the Gulf of Mexico, August 29th, 2005, fall of 2005, it gives us our setting here. And then, so what I did was I chunked the first couple and then the next two. So Tanisha was sad and scared. This was part of her feelings, part of her actions, right? So she watched the heavy rains and it gave her this sad, scared feeling as it ripped through the Mississippi River. She and her family had to drive 350 miles west to Houston, meaning that they evacuated. So again, this is the action that they did. Okay, so again, we're focusing on the actions of the characters to support the theme. So the summary notes that I had in the margin is that Hurricane Katrina hits in August of 2005. Flooding caused families to evacuate. Okay, so let's take a scooch down a little bit. Evacuees. This is what I circled and said these people who evacuated. I know that may be obvious to some, but maybe not obvious to all. I'm talking about this generous Houston family, very giving. Okay, they allowed this whole entire family to stay with them. A few days later, Tanisha started school in Houston. Okay, actions is something that she's doing. So my question is, how is she feeling? She's one of these 125,000 children from New Orleans that had to be scattered across the neighboring states to help give them some sort of shelter. And then again, this word displaced down here in this last part of our chunk here is moved. Okay, so then the notes that I have in my margin here are shelter in the Astrodome, and then kids are sent to school. Excuse me. So I thought that this part was interesting too. I know it goes over a couple pages. School guidance counselors said that relocating to an unfamiliar school is bound to affect many children. This is the expert opinion. Okay, school guidance counselors are the experts in dealing with children who have had some sort of trauma in their life and have now been moved to this different school. Guidance counselors are one of the main people that these children are going to be talking to. So they have this expert opinion. Excuse me again, I apologize. And then just after 2 days of school, Tanisha and Taryn were making new friends. Our new school is great. So the action of them making new friends, and we even get some words here about this positivity. So again, this difference between at the beginning when she was sad and scared and they had to evacuate and there were all of these awful kind of scenarios being tied to her emotions. Now she's at this new school and it seems sort of positive. So my notes for the margin here, siblings go to school in Houston and make new friends. All right, last paragraph here. This is one of my favorite paragraphs. So many of Tanisha's and Taryn's classmates embrace, which means welcome. That's my notes here. We want to make our new classmates feel good because we know they've gone through so much. James McKenna, the 4th grader at McGregor, told. So this is what others said. And remember when we were talking about the classmates, that was one of our questions. So I definitely wanted to make sure that I had this identified. And then also, too, it's cool to have new friends. They get to have fun in a new school and stay in a safe place. These quotes from these outside classmates here are extremely important. They're also going to help support one of our questions that we just previewed. So again, Taryn missed playing basketball with his friends. Tanisha missed her teachers at her old school. But the family said they would most likely settle down and stay in Texas for good. I want to stay in Houston. This is part of her action, what she's saying to Senior Edition again, which was that magazine. So my summary notes for the side here are: family likes the new home and feels accepted and decides to stay for good. So again, I know that Miss Agink has said this a couple times. I am going to go over some of my questions and my answers here. I want you to compare them against yours. You should be looking at these after Miss Agink. After you do your own and kind of comparing to Miss Agink, being like, oh, I had this just like her, or oh, next time I want to make sure that I include this too, or I saw that I left this part out of the question, or I forgot a detail. You're evaluating your responses based on mine. You are not just copying, so please make sure of that. So for A, we're only going to go over the ones that kind of support our learning target, the multiple choice questions. I want you to submit on ReadWork so then you can kind of get that immediate feedback. How did Tanisha change in the story? Why did she change? And how do her actions help us determine her character traits? So again, even though this is not directly talking about the theme, again, we're talking about the actions and traits of the character that help to shape the theme. So I said, Tanisha's emotions change in the story because she originally felt sad and scared and now feels happy. In the text, it states that school was the last thing on her mind when they had to evacuate. And this was when she felt sad and scared about her New Orleans home. At the end, she says, I want to stay in Houston. This shows how she's changed, and her actions of making new friends helped show us this. So B, this is where we're talking about those classmates. So remember when I was showing you how before, just above this, I identified that evidence from James and his sister and what they said about their new classmates. So the theme of Children of the Storm is that positivity can come from negative situations. A devastating storm severely damaged New Orleans, causing major negativity. Tanisha and Taryn's classmates embrace them, saying, we want to make our new classmates feel good because we know they've gone through so much. So before we go on to the next one, I want to kind of go back up here. And I told you that we would kind of revisit this. So the possible themes, the positivity coming from negative situations is obviously the one I chose for my answer. But I also want to talk about the other one that I identified here was the importance of following guidelines when disaster strikes. Okay, so again, Tanisha and Taryn and their family, they had to evacuate. Okay, if they chose not to evacuate, they may not be around to tell the story. So again, it's extremely, extremely important that we are following these guidelines, and this is a prime example. Hurricane Katrina is a prime example of all of the lives that ended up being saved because people followed those rules. All right, let's jump down and take a look again at our next one. So C, this is kind of a tough question, so you have to kind of use your noggin. So again, there's that typo at the end as well. How would the theme change if the siblings hated their new town? Explain. So this is kind of tough here. You have to kind of change the end of the story in your mind. So we know that Tanisha and Taryn really ended up loving where they wanted to stay, and even their family said that they were probably going to end up just staying there for good. But what if they didn't? What if they ended up hating their new town and either having to stay there and not liking it, or having to move back to New Orleans, or having to move to another place? So here's what I thought. I said if the siblings didn't like their new town, the theme would change to negativity comes from negative situations instead of positive. So what I did there was I just changed those negative and positive words around a little bit. The actions of the siblings help the reader determine the theme. The family may have even moved back to New Orleans because they hated Houston, changing the theme entirely. So here you can even say what the new theme might be or not. You can kind of do what I did too, or just kind of maybe change the theme that you gave. So then kind of going through, and go through those very, very quickly. I want to take a look here. Tanisha said that she wanted to stay in Houston. Based on the information in the text, why might she want to stay there? Support your answer with evidence from the text. So, I'm sorry, this didn't scan in as well as the others did. It says Tanisha might want to stay in Houston because of her classmates' kindness. The reader learned that her classmate embraced her and other new students from New Orleans. In the last paragraph, we learn that although Tanisha and Taryn missed their friends, the family said they will most likely settle down there. Tanisha even states, "I want to stay in Houston," to Senior Edition magazine. So again, there's an electronic version of this assignment on ReadWorks. Again, questions A, B, and C going up really, 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 really quick. These questions here are not on ReadWorks. These were added in by Miss Egging to your packet. But please go and there's even some vocabulary work that you can do to just get a little bit more practice with some of those content-specific vocabulary words. All right, thank you, ladies.